Jemima tried to wiggle free, but Harriet held strong. Jemima looked down at the wrecked streets, littered with bodies and robot carcasses. She took a deep breath and charged up her hands with energy and encased her feet in stone. The weight of her stone feet caused Harriet's grip to slip, and the force of Jemima's energy caused her to not be able to regain her hold, and she screamed as she watched Jemima plummet to the earth below. Jemima hit the ground only about 20 feet from Babbage. The robot looked enormous in comparison to her small stature, and she was sure that she was soiling herself just looking at him. Running toward the mechanical beast, Jemima smashed her charged fists into its foot, barely denting it. Jemima thought as the foot rose and came crashing down on her, smashing her through the concrete and into the saw below. Jemima! Harriet screamed as she watched her best friend succumb to the force of Babbage. Harriet was blinded by tears as she flew toward the monster. Die, she screamed as her body began to glow green with radiation, and she plowed into Babbage's chest and rocketed him back with her progression. A rift was torn into the concrete by Babbage's dragging feet as Harriet pushed him back with her energy. Windows shattered as they went past, and the concussive force of Harriet's energy field that she was generating. Nearing the harbor, Harriet altered her course and pushed herself and Babbage into the air above the water. Pushing with one hand, Harriet turned on her communicator. If anyone can hear this, please let my loved ones know that I'm doing this for them, and for the city, hell, probably the world. The heroes of this city are the finest in the world, and I, Half-Life Harriet, am proud to have fought alongside them, even if it was for only a brief time. I'm sorry that I couldn't protect you, Lynn, but we'll be together soon, she said tearfully as she climbed higher into the sky with her opponent who was struggling to break free. Harriet closed her eyes for a moment, and her body began to glow brighter. She opened her eyes, and beams of radiation erupted from them. Her mouth performed a similar action as her body began to hum loudly with energy output. The armor that covered Babbage began to melt as the radioactive energy reached critical mass. Harriet's screams were barely audible as the pair were engulfed in a tremendous ball of atomic energy. The explosion could be seen for miles, and it spread through the air and sent a shockwave to the city below. Buildings close enough to the harbor disappeared as they were blown away by the blast. Vehicles were sent flying like toys through the air. The water in the harbor was sent into a tidal wave by the blast, and flooded nearby streets and buildings. Boats crashed into the cityscape, and destruction came in a mighty wave. Nothing was left of either combatant after the blast, and the city was deathly silent for a long while. Jemima slowly regained consciousness, and climbed her way out of the saw cautiously. Seeing no signs of Babbage, she emerged, a bloody and battered mess, but alive. Sue flew down to her as she saw her come out of the crater. She picked her up and held her close to her chest as she flew the injured girl to safety. It's good to see you're alive, she told Jemima with a tear in her eye. Harriet, where's Harriet? Jemima asked weakly. Sue was silent for a moment. She was crying now as she looked down at the weakened hero in her arms. I'm sorry, honey, but she didn't make it, she said. Jemima's mind shut down. Unable to cope with the news she'd received, she began to bawl and scream like an errant child throwing a temper tantrum. Sue hugged the girl tighter and cried her own mournful tears for all of the fallen heroes that paid the ultimate price for the city they loved. Jemima stood on the dock of Independence Port and looked out at the now still waters. She wore a black dress and held a single rose in her hand. She wiped a tear from her eye and sniffled back her sadness. Do you wanna say something, honey? Sue asked, placing a hand on Jemima's shoulder. Jemima nodded without looking at the woman. Harriet, I can't thank you enough for the sacrifice that you made for this city, and for the love and care that you gave me in our short time together. You were family to me. I loved you, and will miss you forever, she said, her tears free-flowing as she finished, and tossed the rose into the water. Ready? Sue asked. Jemima turned and nodded, and taking Sue by the hand the two walked back to the car.